Waitress helps a drunk billionaire get home. The next morning, he offers her a life-changing job. The bar was dimly lit, the kind of place where secrets and sorrow seemed to swirl with the smoke in the air. Lily adjusted her apron nervously as she polished the last glass, her mind wandering to the pile of bills waiting for her at home. She'd been working double shifts for months, scraping together rent, groceries, and her little brother's tuition. She was exhausted, mentally and physically, but something inside her told her the night was far from over. Then she noticed him. Slumped in the corner, his suit rumpled and soaked from the rain outside, a half-empty glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. He was unmistakably wealthy, the gold watch peeking from under his cuff, the expensive cufflinks, the shoes that screamed money, but he was utterly, painfully human in that moment. His laughter, loud and jagged, turned into sudden choking sobs. People avoided him, whispering behind their hands, disgusted by his drunken display. Most servers would have ignored him, chalked him up to another entitled millionaire losing himself in drink, but something about the sadness in his eyes stopped Lily in her tracks. "Sir, do you need some water?" she asked softly, her voice almost swallowed by the din of the bar. He looked at her, eyes glassy, mouth curling into a lopsided grin. You actually care," he slurred. The words barely made sense, but the vulnerability behind them hit her like a punch to the gut. Without thinking twice, Lily approached him carefully. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, the choice to help a stranger no one else would touch, was about to change her life forever. And he, the powerful billionaire who seemed to have it all, was about to learn a lesson he hadn't expected, that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could ripple into something life-altering. Lily pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out into the cold night, the chill biting through her clothes and seeping into her bones. The rain had eased into a fine drizzle, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of the streetlights, each puddle reflecting the amber light like molten gold. She wiped a few raindrops from her hair and scanned the sidewalk. The man she had noticed at the bar earlier, slumped in his chair, half hidden behind the corner of a high-top table, was staggering toward the exit, his polished shoes slipping on the wet concrete. She recognized the expensive cut of his suit immediately, the cufflinks glinting with every move. But now he looked more human than powerful, fragile and unsteady in a way that tugged at her heart. "Sir, need a hand," she called softly, stepping toward him. He turned his gaze toward her, his eyes glassy and unfocused. For a moment, he seemed confused, like he didn't recognize her presence. Then a lopsided grin spread across his face. "Can you?" he slurred, struggling to stay upright. His words were uneven, punctuated by a hiccup that made her wince. "I've got you," Lily said firmly, guiding his arm around her shoulder. He leaned heavily, almost collapsing, and she tightened her grip instinctively. "We'll get you home safely." As they navigated the streets, she could feel the tension radiating from him, the kind of stress money couldn't touch. He muttered about board meetings, missed deadlines, and investments gone wrong, each word tinged with frustration and regret. I've never met anyone like you," he mumbled, voice wavering. Most people don't care." Lily's heart constricted. "Everyone deserves kindness, sir. Tonight, it's just your turn to receive it," she replied gently, trying to match the calm she felt surging through her. They reached her small car parked a block away, its paint chipped and the tires slightly worn from countless errands and late-night trips. She helped him inside, making sure he settled into the passenger seat safely. He flopped into it with the weight of a man who had carried too much on his shoulders for too long. She clicked his seatbelt into place, and his hand instinctively reached up, brushing against hers as if seeking assurance. The drive was quiet at first, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional splash of water from the tires passing over puddles. Then, slowly, he began speaking again, more coherently this time, sharing fragments of his life, boardroom battles, cold corporate decisions, and a daughter he barely knew but loved fiercely from a distance. Lily listened intently, nodding, asking clarifying questions to keep him grounded, careful not to let him spiral back into the haze of intoxication. You're really kind," he hiccuped, his head lolling lazily against the seat. No one does this." Lily forced a small smile, feeling warmth creep into her chest despite the cold night. "Kindness doesn't cost anything," she said softly. "It's just about noticing someone in need." He closed his eyes briefly, almost as if trying to memorize the feeling of being cared for. I forgot what that feels like," he murmured. When they arrived at his penthouse, she took a deep breath, bracing herself for the final hurdle. The sleek, glass doors of the building gleamed under the early morning light, reflecting the city skyline like a mirror. She helped him through the entrance and into the elevator, steadying him with each step. His grip on her arm was firm yet fragile, a paradox she couldn't ignore. Inside the penthouse, he collapsed onto the plush couch with a groan, burying his face in his hands. The grandeur of the space was intimidating, but it couldn't mask the vulnerability etched across his features. "Water?" she asked, placing a glass gently on the nearby table. He took it, holding the glass like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with sincerity. I don't even know your name." "Lily," she replied simply, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Lily Sanders." He blinked slowly, the drunken haze doing little to conceal the gratitude in his eyes. "Lily, I think I owe you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. She shook her head, a firm but compassionate gesture. "You don't owe anyone kindness, sir. But maybe just rest for now. That's enough." Lily lingered for a moment, her gaze meeting his, and in that silent exchange, she felt an unspoken bond form, a connection rooted in humanity rather than wealth or status. She stepped toward the door, leaving him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the small miracle that had just occurred in a quiet penthouse. As Lily walked down the corridor, her heart was heavier than when she arrived, weighed not by regret, but by the quiet triumph of doing the right thing. Little did she know, the seeds she had planted tonight, through patience, courage, and a simple act of human compassion, were about to blossom into something far beyond her imagination, something that could change her life forever. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of Lily's small apartment, scattering a warm golden light across the room. It highlighted the unpaid bills stacked haphazardly on the kitchen table, her brother's worn textbooks, and the crumbs left from last night's hurried dinner. Lily stirred awake, the memory of the previous evening still vivid, her heart pounding at the thought of guiding a drunken billionaire safely home, her hands trembling from the adrenaline, the cold, and worry. She sat up slowly, rubbing her temples, the events replaying in her mind. The way he had leaned on her, trusting her completely. The way his eyes, for brief moments, had flickered with vulnerability so raw it had almost knocked the wind out of her. And yet, underneath that drunken haze, there had been something else, a spark of gratitude, a trace of a man who had long lost touch with kindness, but remembered it when it mattered most. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She reached for it, expecting a message from work or a reminder about the overdue bills. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, she answered. "Hello." Her voice was cautious, almost whispering, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile connection she sensed. "Good morning, Lily," came the smooth, deep voice that she instantly recognized, even through the phone. Her heart skipped a beat. "It's Jonathan Whittaker, from last night." Her breath caught. Jonathan Whittaker, the billionaire whose drunken form she had steadied, whose life she had, in some small way, kept from unraveling. Yes," she managed to say, barely keeping her composure. "I wanted to call you myself," he continued. "To thank you, not just for last night, but for the way you treated me. With patience, with care, like I mattered. Most people wouldn't have given me the time of day." Lily's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she whispered, unsure how to articulate the overwhelming mix of pride, disbelief, and nervous anticipation that churned inside her. "No, extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it," Jonathan said. There was a quiet intensity in his voice now, a clarity that had been absent beneath the alcohol. "You saw me for what I was, not for what I appear to be on the surface. That means something." Lily's fingers fidgeted with the edge of the phone. She had spent her life working hard, keeping her dignity intact while struggling to make ends meet. And now this man, this titan of business, whose name graced headlines, was expressing gratitude that felt almost unreal. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say you'll hear me out," he said gently, "because I want to offer you an opportunity. Not charity, not a handout, a chance, a real one. Meet me at my office this afternoon. Just you, no one else. No pressure. I want to discuss something that could change your life." Lily's pulse quickened. An opportunity from a billionaire? The very thought seemed ludicrous, yet thrilling. She had dreamed of a better life, a secure life, a life where her talents and kindness could be recognized beyond the low-paying shifts and endless struggles. And now, the possibility was tangible. "Okay, "I'll come," she said finally, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Good," he said warmly. "I'll see you this afternoon. And Lily, thank you again. Truly." The call ended, leaving Lily staring at the phone as if it had just delivered a message from another world. Her stomach fluttered with anticipation, anxiety, and hope all at once. She spent the morning pacing, trying to calm herself, reviewing in her mind what she could say, how she could present herself. Not as a waitress, not as a struggling young woman, but as someone who deserved to be here, someone capable of making a difference. By early afternoon, she found herself standing before the towering glass and steel building of Whitaker Enterprises. The lobby gleamed with polished marble, its high ceilings and cascading lights reflecting a world she had never truly entered. She took a deep breath, smoothing her blouse and tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Here goes everything," she whispered to herself, and stepped inside. A sleek elevator whisked her upward, and when the doors opened to the executive floor, Jonathan was waiting. He looked impeccably put together in a tailored suit, his sharp features softened by the hint of gratitude and vulnerability in his eyes. "Lily," he greeted, extending a hand, "thank you for coming." "Of course," she replied, trying to steady her racing heart. He gestured toward his office, and they entered together. The space was vast, lined with books, awards, and photographs of his family, a world of achievement that contrasted sharply with the modest apartment she had left behind. "Sit, please," he said, pointing to a chair. His voice was steady now, confident yet warm. "I want to talk to you about more than just last night. I've seen how you handle yourself under pressure, how you show empathy even when it's not convenient. That's rare, and it's exactly the kind of person I want on my team." Lily's heart leapt. "Me? Here?" "Yes," he said, leaning forward, eyes locking with hers. "I'm offering you a role, not a charity position, not a favor. A position where your talents and your character will be recognized, valued, and rewarded. You've earned this, Lily. Will you consider it?" She felt her chest tighten, tears threatening to spill. It wasn't just a job. It was hope, security, the possibility of a future she had dared to dream about in secret. She nodded, unable to speak, and in that moment the world seemed to tilt in a way that could only be described as life-changing. The first morning at Whitaker Enterprises felt surreal to Lily. She stood outside the towering glass doors, taking a deep breath, reminding herself that she belonged here, not as a waitress, not as someone scraping by, but as a professional ready to step into a world she had only ever glimpsed from afar. Her hands tightened around her bag, knuckles white, as she rehearsed what she might say, how she could contribute, and how she could make a real difference. Jonathan greeted her personally again, his expression a mixture of warmth and quiet confidence. "Lily," he said, "I'm glad you're here. Today is your first day, but consider it more than that. It's the start of your transformation." Lily nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Transformation. The word itself felt like a promise she hadn't dared to hope for until now. Jonathan led her to a sleek, glass-walled office that overlooked the city skyline. "This will be your workspace," he said. "But I want you to understand one thing before we begin. This isn't just about the tasks I'll assign. It's about showing initiative, bringing ideas, challenging norms, and proving that empathy can drive results just as much as strategy. You're not here to wait for instruction. You're here to lead in ways only you can." Her heart pounded as she took in her surroundings, dual monitors, neatly organized files, and a view of the bustling city below. It was a universe apart from the cramped diner where she had spent her evenings, pouring coffee for strangers who barely acknowledged her existence. And yet, a quiet determination settled in her chest. She could do this. She had to. The first task Jonathan gave her was deceptively simple: review a stack of internal reports from a recently failed project and identify where human-centered decision-making had been overlooked. At first glance, it seemed like dry, tedious work, but as Lily dove into the data, she noticed patterns others had missed. Employees had been overworked, clients had been ignored, and a lack of empathy had cost the company both reputation and revenue. "Interesting," she muttered under her breath, jotting notes in her notebook. Her fingers flew across the pages, connecting dots and forming insights. By the time she finished, she had outlined a detailed plan that could salvage the project, improve employee morale, and boost client retention, all by focusing on people first. Jonathan returned just as she was finishing. He scanned her notes, eyes widening slightly. "Lily, this is extraordinary," he said. "You've captured what our team failed to see in months. How did you? His voice trailed off, but the admiration in his eyes was unmistakable. I just noticed what was missing, Lily said softly, feeling both proud and nervous. Sometimes it's the small things that make the biggest difference. Jonathan nodded. Exactly. And that's why I brought you here. Most people are blind to these details. You're already thinking like a leader. Over the next few weeks, Lily's world transformed at a dizzying pace. She attended strategy meetings, presented ideas directly to Jonathan, and began mentoring junior staff on incorporating empathy into their projects. Her confidence grew with each passing day, though it wasn't without challenges. Some colleagues were skeptical of her sudden rise, dismissing her as a charity hire or a novelty. One afternoon, a senior manager sneered at her during a team meeting. So, Lily, what makes you think you understand corporate strategy better than those of us who've been here for years? Lily felt her pulse quicken, a familiar flash of insecurity rising, but she remembered Jonathan's words, lead in ways only you can. She straightened her posture, met his gaze across the room, and calmly replied, I'm not claiming to know everything, but I notice what others overlook. I listen to both numbers and people, and sometimes that makes all the difference. The room went silent. A few skeptical faces softened, others muttered under their breath, but Lily held her ground. She didn't need everyone to understand immediately. She only needed results to speak for her. By the end of the month, the project she had overseen had turned around dramatically. Employee engagement scores rose, client satisfaction improved, and the once failing initiative was now being cited as a model for other departments. Jonathan walked into her office one evening, a rare smile of genuine pride on his face. You've exceeded every expectation, Lily, he said. I knew you had potential, but I hadn't anticipated the speed and depth of your impact. You're transforming not just the company, but everyone around you. Lily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I didn't know I could do this, she admitted. You could, Jonathan said firmly. You just needed the opportunity and the courage to take it. Never forget that. As she left the office that night, walking through the city streets with a newfound sense of purpose, Lily realized her life had already begun to change. The timid waitress who had guided a stranger home in the rain had evolved into a woman whose insight, courage, and empathy could influence the fate of a billion-dollar company. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The transformation wasn't just about her career, it was about redefining what it meant to lead, to care, and to succeed on her own terms. Weeks passed, and Lily's transformation was no longer subtle. It was impossible to ignore. The timid waitress who had guided a drunken billionaire home in the rain had returned to the same streets, the same city she had always known, but she herself had changed. She walked with a new confidence, her shoulders squared, eyes alert, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. It was a Saturday morning when she decided to revisit the diner where she had worked so many long nights, pouring coffee for strangers who never noticed her. She had not stepped inside since accepting her role at Whitaker Enterprises. The memories of exhaustion and uncertainty were vivid, and the place had shaped much of who she had become. Today, though, she walked in not as a server, but as someone returning triumphant, aware of her worth and the life she was building. As she entered, a wave of familiarity hit her, the clinking of coffee cups, the low hum of conversation, the aroma of freshly baked pastries. The staff glanced up, some with curiosity, some with polite indifference. When her former manager recognized her, his jaw dropped. Lily? Is that really you? Lily smiled softly. Yes. I thought I'd stop by, she said, her voice calm, but carrying the subtle authority that now defined her. She didn't announce her new position or her association with Jonathan Whitaker. She simply let her presence speak volumes. She walked past the counter, observing the diner with the keen eye that had become her hallmark. She noticed inefficiencies she had never seen before, the cluttered prep area, the disorganized order system, the tension among the staff. Where others might have seen problems, she saw opportunities. Can I get a coffee? A familiar voice called from behind the counter. It was Maria, her co-worker, smiling nervously. You look different. I've changed a bit, Lily admitted, taking a seat near the window. But it's still the same wonderful place. She ordered a coffee and sat quietly, reflecting on how far she had come. Her mind wandered to Jonathan, and the confidence he had instilled in her, the trust he had placed in her vision, her judgment, her instincts. She realized she had begun to carry herself in the world not as someone defined by circumstance, but as someone who created her own path. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed a young man struggling with a tray of drinks. Without thinking, she stood and guided him, offering a few tips she had learned in her months at Whitaker Enterprises. "Always organize your orders by table number," she suggested. "It keeps everything flowing smoothly, even during rush hour." The young man blinked at her, clearly shocked by the unsolicited guidance. Thanks," he stammered. "I've never seen anyone handle it like that." Lily smiled gently. "Sometimes all it takes is a little perspective," she said, and returned to her seat. It was a small moment, but it filled her with quiet satisfaction. The confidence she had gained was not about power or money. It was about knowing she could make a difference wherever she went. As she prepared to leave, she noticed a familiar face in the corner. It was the local bartender, Tom, who had once mocked her ambitions. He stared at her, recognition dawning slowly. You're Lily, aren't you? From the diner, from Whitaker Enterprises." She nodded. "Yes. I'm here to see what's changed, and maybe offer a little advice, if I can." Tom's expression softened. I never imagined this. You've really changed things for yourself, haven't you?" Lily's smile held both pride and humility. "I've been given an opportunity, yes, but it wasn't just given. I had to step up, take risks, and trust myself. And that's something anyone can do." She left the diner feeling lighter than she had in years. The streets she had once walked with uncertainty now seemed like a stage upon which she had begun to direct her own story. The city didn't feel intimidating, it felt full of possibilities. By the time she returned to Whitaker Enterprises that afternoon, she was greeted not only with the respect of her colleagues, but with admiration. Jonathan appeared at the entrance to her office, his smile warm, a glint of pride in his eyes. "I heard you visited your old diner," he said. "How was it?" "It was enlightening," Lily admitted, settling into her chair. "It reminded me where I started and why I'm here now. It's not just about me. It's about impact, about changing lives one step at a time." Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. You're not just transforming the company, you're transforming the people around you. And that, Lily, is true leadership." Her eyes shone with determination. "I want to keep doing that," she said. "Not just for the company, for everyone I can reach. If I can inspire even one person to see their own worth, it's worth it." Jonathan's smile widened. "And that's exactly why you'll succeed. You didn't just come back from the diner. You returned as someone who knows her power, someone who understands responsibility and empathy. That's rare, and it's why you're going to change everything around you." As Lily looked out over the city skyline from her office window, she felt a deep sense of purpose settling within her. She wasn't just a woman who had helped a billionaire home from a bar. She was a catalyst for change, a leader in the making, and a reminder that transformation begins with small, courageous acts and grows into something extraordinary. And in that moment, she realized that her journey had only just begun. Lily sat at her desk, reviewing the latest reports, when a knock at the door broke her concentration. Before she could respond, two senior executives entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism. She recognized them from previous meetings. The ones who had doubted her whispered about her charity hire status and questioned whether a former waitress could really handle the responsibilities of a high-profile corporate position. "Lily," one of them said, voice formal, "we need to discuss your recent recommendations on the Whitaker project. There are concerns." Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced doubts before, had felt the sting of judgment, and had grown stronger because of it. "I'm listening," she replied evenly, gesturing for them to sit. The first executive, Thomas, leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Your approach, prioritizing employee well-being over immediate profits, it's unorthodox. Many would argue it risks the company's bottom line." Lily's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I understand your concern, Thomas, but the data is clear. Employee engagement has improved by 35%, client satisfaction is up, and our retention rates are an all-time high. Prioritizing people isn't a risk, it's an investment in sustainable success." The second executive, Caroline, interjected with a skeptical smirk. "That's fine on paper, Lily, but can these results be maintained long-term? You've only been here a few months. You don't yet understand the pressures of executive decision-making." Lily leaned back slightly, her mind racing. She had anticipated this confrontation, the whispers, the questioning of her experience, the subtle attacks on her credibility. But she also knew that hesitation or self-doubt would only strengthen their assumptions. She drew a deep breath. "Caroline Thomas, I may not have spent years in corporate leadership, but I've spent years observing, listening, and adapting. I've seen what works, what fails, and why. Leadership isn't just about tenure, it's about insight, empathy, and execution. My approach is data-driven, and it's producing results. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, clearly frustrated that their arguments weren't landing. And what about authority? He pressed. Do you think employees will respect directives from someone without the traditional experience? Lily smiled faintly, her confidence growing. Respect is earned, not assumed. I've earned it by being present, attentive, and fair. People respond to honesty and competence, not titles. The employees respect what we're building together because it works, and they see it working every day. For a tense moment, silence filled the room. Then Caroline's smirk faltered, replaced by a grudging nod. I suppose the metrics do speak for themselves, she admitted reluctantly. Before Thomas could respond, Lily's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at it, a message from Jonathan. It read simply, "Trust yourself. You are exactly where you're meant to be." A wave of reassurance washed over her. She looked back at the two executives, her resolve unwavering. I'm here to make tough decisions, to challenge assumptions, and to ensure that the company thrives in every sense, not just financially, but ethically, sustainably, and with integrity. If that makes people uncomfortable, so be it. But results speak louder than skepticism. Thomas leaned back, rubbing his temples, clearly realizing the futility of pushing further. Fine, he muttered. We'll continue to monitor the project. But make sure these results hold. Lily nodded, suppressing a sense of triumph. They will. And if they don't, we adapt. That's how we grow. As the executives left, the office felt lighter. She exhaled, letting herself relax for the first time, in what felt like weeks. Yet the confrontation had left her energized, aware that she was no longer just navigating the corporate world, she was shaping it. Later that evening, Jonathan stopped by her office unexpectedly. I heard about the meeting, he said, leaning against her doorway with a small, approving smile. How did it go? Lily looked up from her desk, a mix of relief and satisfaction on her face. It was intense, she admitted, but I held my ground. I made them see that what we're doing works and why it matters. Jonathan's eyes gleamed with pride. Exactly what I hoped you'd do. You didn't just defend your ideas, you showed leadership. You're proving that courage, integrity, and empathy aren't just nice words, they're powerful tools. And people respect results more than titles. A soft smile spread across Lily's face. I didn't realize how much I doubted myself before this. I thought I needed approval from everyone, but I don't. I just need to trust that I'm capable. Jonathan nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And you are. You've already transformed the company, Lily. But more importantly, you've transformed yourself. That's the kind of impact that lasts. As he left, Lily sat back in her chair, letting the weight of the confrontation settle. It had tested her resolve, forced her to stand up for herself, and challenged her to prove that her unconventional path could succeed. And in facing it, she realized something powerful. She no longer needed validation from anyone but herself. The night stretched on, quiet and contemplative. Outside the office window, the city lights twinkled like 1,000 possibilities. Lily felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the confrontation wasn't an obstacle. It was a confirmation of her journey, a reminder that she was ready for the challenges yet to come. And as she packed up her notes and prepared to leave, she understood clearly that the grandest part of her transformation wasn't the accolades or recognition. It was the unwavering belief in herself that no one could ever take away. The next morning, Lily woke to the soft light of dawn streaming through her apartment window. It was quiet, peaceful, even, and she felt a rare moment of contentment settle into her chest. The events of the past months, from rescuing Jonathan Whitaker on that rainy night to standing her ground in the corporate confrontation, had changed her life in ways she was still beginning to understand. Her phone buzzed, interrupting the calm. She glanced at the screen and saw Jonathan's name. Hesitant, yet curious, she answered. "Lily," he said warmly, his voice carrying a rare gentleness, "I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done. Not just at work, but for me. You reminded me what it feels like to be human again." Lily's heart skipped. I'm just glad I could help," she replied, her voice soft. "I didn't expect any of this." "Exactly," he said. "And because of you, I realized that the people we overlook, the ones who show courage when it's least convenient, are often the ones who make the greatest difference. You've done that, Lily. And I don't want to stop there." Her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "I want you to lead a new initiative at Whitaker Enterprises," Jonathan explained. "It's a program I've been wanting to start, a mentorship and empowerment project for employees at every level, helping them grow, giving them the support they deserve. I want you to run it. You've shown vision, empathy, and leadership that can inspire others. I can't think of anyone better for the job." Lily's eyes welled with tears, her chest tightening at the weight of the offer. This was more than a job. This was a chance to impact lives the way she had once dreamed, to make a real difference in the world, and to prove to herself that the small acts of kindness she had always believed in could ripple outward in unimaginable ways. I don't know what to say," she whispered, fighting back a flood of emotions. "Say yes," Jonathan said, a gentle insistence in his tone. "Say yes to this. Say yes to yourself." After a pause, Lily's lips curved into a smile, and she nodded. "Yes, I'll do it." Jonathan's voice brightened, and she could hear his smile through the phone. "Good. Then let's get started." That afternoon, Lily arrived at Whitaker Enterprises with renewed purpose. She gathered her team in a bright conference room, introducing herself as the new head of the initiative. She shared her story, not the corporate achievements, not the accolades, but the journey that began with helping a man who had fallen in the rain. She spoke of courage, kindness, and believing in one's own potential. By the end of the meeting, the room buzzed with energy. Employees were inspired, motivated, and ready to embrace a new culture where empathy and ambition worked hand in hand. Lily felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that her impact wasn't just on metrics or profits, it was on lives. Weeks later, Jonathan invited her to a celebratory luncheon. The two sat in his office, looking out over the city that had once seemed so vast and intimidating. "Lily," he said, pouring 2 glasses of sparkling water, "you've done more than I ever imagined. You've transformed a department, inspired a company, and reminded me what it means to care." Lily smiled, her eyes shining. "I never expected any of this. I just tried to do what felt right." "That's exactly why it worked," Jonathan replied. "Sometimes the right thing isn't the easiest, but it's always the most powerful." They clinked glasses in a quiet toast. Lily felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the journey that had led her here. She thought of her little brother, her family, the struggles she had faced, and the small acts of courage that had defined her path. And in that moment, she understood something deeply. Life could change in an instant when kindness met opportunity, when courage met chance, and when belief met action. A week later, Lily visited the diner one last time, this time not to observe but to give back. She spoke with the staff, sharing tips and encouragement, offering a small donation to help renovate the kitchen, and leaving them with a message she hoped they would carry forward. Your actions matter. Your kindness matters. Your potential matters. As she walked out into the sunlight, a breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee and warm bread, and she felt lighter than she had ever been. She had entered the corporate world unsure of herself, a young woman with little more than courage and empathy. Now, she left it not only empowered but transformative, someone who had reshaped her own life and was beginning to shape the lives of countless others. Later that evening, she returned to her apartment and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was confident, compassionate, and unshakable. She had come full circle, from helping a man who had fallen in the rain to becoming a catalyst for change, proving that even the smallest acts could lead to life-altering outcomes. And in her heart, Lily knew this was just the beginning. She whispered to herself, almost as a promise, "This is my life, and I will live it fully with courage, kindness, and purpose." The sun set outside her window, painting the sky in golds and pinks, a mirror of the hope and promise that now defined her life. For Lily, the stormy night that had started it all was no longer a memory of struggle. It was the spark that had ignited a life-changing journey.